Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
I'm Carson.
I am Coleman.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. President Trump has floated the idea of having a no income tax in the United States with Joe Rogan. Holden, what can you tell us about this proposal?
Well, I tweeted out about this because obviously the income tax is unethical the way it's collected. It's immoral. It's horrible economics. It's literally charging you for being productive to society. So I tweeted out about this, though. This is just the unfortunate reality. It's actually not possible to raise enough tax revenue to pay for our massive government with just tariffs. Trump is comparing apples to oranges. Today we have a much larger government than we used to. The government needs much more tax revenue to fund its massive expenditures, which account for about 25% of GDP. That's just the federal government. Before we had the 16th Amendment, government spending was about 3% of GDP. It's actually a little bit less. Cutting government spending would be a great step in the right direction, but we know that's not going to happen. So in order for us to get rid of the income tax right now, given the fiscal position of the United States, we have to replace it with something else. And tariffs just can't raise enough revenue to pay for the government. A sales tax would be far better. That's going to discourage consumption instead of taxing you for being productive. So if he wants to, that would be a step in the right direction, though. I would abolish the income tax day one, but I would replace it with the sales tax.
Interesting. Okay, so you would prefer having a sales tax as opposed to, say, a voluntary donation to the government?
Oh, well, no. I mean, I'm completely reject taxation. But the problem is the government has put us in a horrible position. Because we have all this debt, because of the situation that the government has put us in, we have to have a tax right now. Now, I would phase it out, and I would get rid of it as soon as possible, but I would also default in the debt, and that's a whole other issue. I could go on it for an hour, but I'm not. Specifically about this issue, a sales tax is far better economically than an income tax, and it makes far more sense given our position right now, but you can't just replace it with tariffs.
Okay. And Coleman, you're studying economics. What can you tell us about this?
So I guess it might be good just for context as to here's the full argument. The full argument is one of the presidents that we had who was actually assassinated. That was William McKinley. William McKinley was president from 1897 to 1901. What was he known for? Well, basically, he was a guy who came in right before Theodore Roosevelt, and his economic policy was raising, money for the state or for the country as a whole, GDP-wise, by economic protectionism. So the logic was you place tariffs on foreign countries, so that way your domestic industries do better, and then maybe the taxes you place on foreign countries raise some revenue, but because your domestic industries are doing better and don't have to compete with foreign nations, there's more prosperity at the local level. And anyway, so then that whole thing, he was assassinated, William McKinley, in 1901. Then you had Theodore Roosevelt come in. Apparently something else that happened around that time was a Blue Ribbon Committee, in which there was so much economic wealth during this period that the wealth was dispersed. They had to figure out what to do with it. Therefore, they set up a Blue Ribbon Committee to figure out how to spend the money accordingly. Anyway, fast forward to the year 1909. That's when you have the 16th Amendment being passed, but not yet ratified. What is the 16th Amendment? Well, that's when Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. And this thing, the amendment, was then later ratified in 1913. I believe this was also the year that the Federal Reserve came into the picture.
That's right.
And it was also the year that I believe we came off the gold standard.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the full picture. I think we were on the silver for a while, too. I think we, at least until 1957, but I think we got off of silver.
Well, technically, the last link to gold was 1971, but we effectively went off the gold standard in 1913, 1914.
Okay, yeah.
Because now we have fiat in the mix.
Yes, okay. So that's the full historical context. Now, as far as how it would be possible, I'm not sure if it would be possible for the president to get rid of, the Amendment 16. For instance, but I think you would probably need, the House and Senate in order to like repeal an amendment, right? So maybe he'll be able to like the degree he would be able to negotiate that is like questionable. But I think on paper, this is like one of those weird things where like on paper, you guys would like love to have the income tax removed because you're very much. You say, oh, the welfare state encourages less productive people to continue to be less productive. Meanwhile, the income tax discourages productivity because the more money you make, the more productive you are, the more you're punished.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and again, the way you two are viewing this is it's a matter of, okay, can we realistically get rid of the income tax in this position? You're arguing not because, we wouldn't be able to like raise enough revenue.
I'm actually arguing that I would get rid of the income tax on day one.
Oh, but replace it with the sales tax.
Yes.
You're saying it can't be done in a vacuum. Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah.
Okay. And now I guess the full argument to this picture is like, okay, well maybe the income tax, like, the whole argument here is like, well, we're introducing the income tax so that we don't put as much tariffs down. But now the question is, okay, if we get rid of the income tax, could tariffs really make up the difference or not? You're arguing not. Why?
I know why. Because right now the government's collecting about $125 billion just from tariffs. That's at a relatively low tariff rate. If the tariffs were raised to about 10% or something ridiculous, assuming you have the same amount of imports, and total U.S. imports are somewhere around 3.2 trillion. Assuming you have a similar amount of imports, it's not nearly enough revenue. So that's going to give you about $310 billion or so, $320 billion. And the government's spending over $7 trillion a year. That's a huge budget deficit.
Yeah.
We know the worst tax, that's inflation. The Fed is going to have to monetize those deficits. Where's the Fed going to get the money? They have to print the money. They have to create it. So that's the worst tax. That's why it won't work just like that. You can't just do that. The income tax is providing about $2.4 trillion a year. So that's going to be a ton of lost revenue.
Carson, what do you think? You haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, so I think while I generally agree with Holden, I just want to like recontextualize this because the argument from Trump is that if you just imposed a tariff high enough, I mean, he floated the idea on another, I believe it was in another interview, of doing, like, he said he could impose a 1,000 or 2,000% tariff. Tariffs work like any other market. There's supply and there's demand. And once you impose a tariff high enough, you're just going to lose all demand. Nobody will import into this country. And we are currently, I don't know if you guys know this, but we are currently in a trade deficit. So the idea that we're going to just remove all imports in this country is absurd.
Oh, it would be a disaster.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the argument either. I mean, it was like get rid of all imports. That's taking it to the extreme. But the other part of the picture is, that he's proposing here, Trump, is that, okay, well, if you could just produce in America and then therefore you get no tariff. Well, what about that part?
So, I mean, in my opinion, that's not a free market. But
not a free market? Okay.
Furthermore, more importantly, just on the tariff thing, because I'll let Holden go off on this point in a second, but on the tariff thing, if you were to impose a tariff high enough that would currently fund our government, that would be like saying we are going to have no imports, because a tariff at the level that would fund our federal government would be absurdly high. It probably would be near 1,000 to 2,000%. And so that's my point, is Trump might as well just say we should have no imports into this country, because that's what that policy is going to incentivize.
If you try to make everything here, the cost of goods is going to go skyrocket because we're going to be far less productive. Many capital goods in the United States come abroad from other countries. This makes us more productive. We're more efficient. If you get a T-shirt in China for $5, that costs $15 to make in the United States because we have more taxes, more regulations, or whatever. Then you're not going to have the other $10 you would have otherwise had to spend it on something else in the economy or to save. That increases capital. You have more capital investment. So it's a fantasy to try and, if you think it's a good idea to make everything in America, that's just stupid.
Wait, so question. Are you saying like the foreign countries are more productive than America?
I'm making certain goods.
At making certain goods.
So China happens to be really good at making clothes. In America, we're really good at making software and energy. So everybody specializes. We have a deeper division of labor. and we're all more productive as a result. Everybody does whatever they do best at. That's why you don't make your own house. You don't make, whatever. So that's basically what the division of labor is for.
Interesting. I think that you could use the tariffs as a good negotiating tool in order to get other countries to lower their tariffs on us. Because the European Union, for example, they're not buying our cars. And if we were able to get a better deal from the European Union, then we could have more trade, more exchange. So I think there is at least a purpose to using them in negotiation.
Well, we don't. If they're not buying our cars, then we shouldn't be selling the cars to them. It's because they feel like they can get a better deal somewhere else. We should focus on whatever we're best at. We don't need to have an auto industry. We just need to focus on what do we do best? We do that. Everybody's going to have higher wages. You're going to have higher productivity, and we're going to be far more efficient. That's what you want.
Well, if the tariff from the European Union was 2% on cars as opposed to, say, 75%, then I think you'd see a lot higher demand just by the nature of the cost of it.
I think you're fighting fire with fire in that situation. You're saying that tariffs are bad when they're imposed on us, so we're going to impose them on everyone else at an extremely high rate and disincentivize people coming here.
I see what you mean, though I think that they've worked in the past in getting trade deals with other countries like Japan, like South Korea, renegotiating those deals. But Coleman, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, and I think where Holden and Carson are coming from here is an idea of a comparative advantage. Like, for instance, if you have a comparative advantage at producing a good, like as in you're more productive at it, and therefore it's best in theory to let that nation produce the good, and then, but that again, you could just say, well, wait a minute, what if we apply that? I mean, you have like a broad, global scope when you're looking at this, which is fine. But that, I guess I'm like, well, you could easily, I guess, also provide, like, look at the comparative advantage level between like the different states, because we're pretty, we're pretty diverse too. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. Well, and a conversation worth having in the future. So thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, what have you. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day.